They thought the cameras would protect them. They thought the formality of a Senate hearing would keep things civil, controlled, safe. They were wrong. What unfolded wasn't another forgettable political moment destined to vanish into the news cycle. It was the kind of confrontation that exposes cracks in a system built on secrets. Kash Patel sat across from Senator Adam Schiff, and between them hung questions that have haunted America for years. Questions about power, about justice, about names in a book that powerful people never wanted you to see.
Up a trap so you can have a
Oh,
media
no, I'm
narrative.
not setting up a trap.
And I'm not giving it to you.
Unless it's true that you fired people.
People have been terminated at the FBI who failed to uphold the standards that the FBI requires them to uphold.
Did you tell anyone at the FBI that all FBI employees who they identified who had worked on cases against President Trump would be removed from their jobs? Did you tell that to someone at the FBI?
Say that I would remove people for case assignments?
That people that were identified as having worked on cases against President Trump would be removed from their jobs. Did you tell that to someone at the FBI?
People are not removed for
just
case
answer my
assignments.
question. Just answer my question. Did you tell that to someone?
People are not removed for case
No,
assignments.
you're not answering my question.
And I would never
Mr. Patel,
tell anyone.
Did you tell someone at the FBI that FBI employees identified as having worked on cases against President Trump would be removed from their jobs? Yes or no? Did you tell someone that?
I would never tell anyone at the FBI that they're being removed for basically their case assignments.
Okay, so anyone who had said that would be lying. Is that your testimony?
Anyone can say whatever they want.
No, I know, but you're saying they were a liar.
I'm telling you what I said.
Because this is in the complaint against you, Mr. Patel. So you're saying Mr. Driscoll and others are liars?
I'm not going to address the complaint in the ongoing
Okay, well then let me ask you, have you ever told anyone at the FBI that the FBI tried to put the president in jail and he hasn't forgotten it, and that your job depended on the removal of agents who worked on cases against the president?
No.
Did you ever tell anyone that?
No.
Okay. Did you ever tell anyone that you knew these summary firings you were undertaking were illegal, likely illegal, and that you would be sued and later deposed? Did you ever tell anyone that?
No firings at the FBI or terminations were done for anything other than justified
Did you ever
cause.
tell anyone that, Mr.
No,
Patel? Why don't you
no
answer my question?
terminations at the FBI were ever done in my tenure for anything other than failing.
Did you ever
to
tell
uphold
anyone
their
that,
oath of
Mr.
their
Patel? You willing to
office
answer
or
the question?
The FBI.
I guess
I
you're
have
not willing to
answered
answer the
it.
question. So let me move on. Let me
Repeatedly.
move on to the Epstein files. You said you're the most transparent FBI director in history, so I'm going to put you to the test. In 2024, you were asked by Glenn Beck about Epstein's Black Book. And you said, he asked, who has Jeffrey Epstein's Black Book? And you said, Black Book FBI. And he said, but who? That is, I mean, there's, and you said, oh, that's under the direct control of the director of the FBI. That's what you said. Was that true, Mr. Patel?
I'll rely on you quoting it accurately. I did that a
Was
couple
it
years
true
ago.
what you represented to Mr. Beck and the president's supporters out there, or were you lying? Was it true that the Black Book, Epstein's Black Book, was in the possession of the FBI director?
The Black Book was in the possession of the FBI.
Okay, so now that you're the FBI director, you have possession of the Black Book, right?
That index has been released.
So you have Jeffrey Epstein's Black Book?
What is known as Jeffrey Epstein's Black Book has been released by us.
And you released it. And let me follow up on Senator Kennedy's question, because he asked you, and I'll be very precise here. You've seen most of the files. Who, if anyone, did Epstein traffic these young women to besides himself? And you said, himself. There's no credible information, none. If there were, I would bring the case yesterday that he trafficked to other individuals. And Kennedy, the information we have, again, is limited. And Senator Kennedy said, the answer is no one. And you said, for the information we have. So is it your testimony today that in all the Epstein files, that Jeffrey Epstein trafficked no one to anyone but himself? Is that your testimony, Mr.
I never
Patel?
said Jeffrey Epstein didn't traffic anyone else.
Did he traffic any young woman to someone other than himself? That was Mr. Kennedy's question,
And I
Senator Kennedy's
said
question.
the information that 3 administrations have had access to
I'm
have
asking
made
you-
determinations that there are no investigative leads that were credible to prosecute and investigate any others. I'm
Well,
specifically
I'm asking
stating
you whether
we
it's
were
your
working on.
testimony today
Well, you just read it, and I said it 10 minutes ago, so let the record reflect my testimony.
I just want to make sure there's no misunderstanding, because there are victims like Virginia Guifer who have testified otherwise, who have said otherwise, and you're telling the American people today that the Epstein list is a single name and it's Jeffrey Epstein. That's what we're to believe?
That's not what I'm saying. That's what you're saying, and
Well,
you can say whatever you want.
Let me ask you this. When Todd Blanche went to interview Ghislaine Maxwell, she said, but did I think these guys were coming for that? I really don't. If you met Epstein, there's no way that this cast of characters, of which it's extraordinary, and some are in your cabinet, who you value as your co-workers, and would be with him if he was a creep or because they wanted sexual favors. A man wants sexual favors, he will find that. They didn't have to come to Epstein for that. And the next question Todd Blanche, the president's former criminal defense lawyer, asked is not who in the cabinet, who are you referring to? His question is, so when's the last time you think you were with Mr. Epstein when he got a massage? So let me ask you, who are those cabinet members that Ghislaine Maxwell was referring to that were part of this cast of characters associated with Mr. Epstein? Who are they?
The Deputy Attorney General took the aggressive step that no one else did and interviewed Miss Maxwell for 2 days, and we released the entirety of that transcript.
Who are the cabinet members?
I do not have that transcript in front of me. You're picking it piecemeal. The American public can read the entirety of that.
One last question, because you clearly won't tell us the cabinet members associated with Mr. Epstein. Let me ask you one last question. And that is, right after she gives this testimony, in front of an FBI agent, among others, she's transferred to a minimum security prison not suitable for a sex offender like herself. Who made that decision and why?
The Bureau of Prisons.
The Bureau of Decisions made it in
prisons.
The Bureau of Prisons decided on their own, without any consultation with Blanche or anyone else, that they were going to suddenly, after this interview, completely unrelated to this interview, completely unrelated to anything she said, move her to a prison not suitable for a sex offender. You want the American people to believe that? Do you think they're stupid?
No. I think the American people believe the truth, that I'm not in the weeds on the everyday movements of inmates.
Not in the weeds?
What I am doing is protecting this country, providing historic reform, and combating the weaponization of intelligence by the likes of you.
Schiff didn't come for theatrics. He came with receipts. And when he started asking about Jeffrey Epstein's black book, something shifted in Patel's expression. That tiny flicker of recognition, the kind you see when someone realizes they've walked into a trap they can't escape. Because this wasn't just about one ledger or one case. This was about whether anyone at the top ever really faces consequences, or if the system just protects its own until the public stops paying attention. The hearing started with a different question, though, one that seemed simple on the surface, but cut straight to the bone of everything the FBI is supposed to stand for. Schiff leaned forward and asked Patel directly, "Did you fire FBI employees because they worked on cases against President Trump?" It's the kind of question that deserves a yes or no, the kind that separates leaders from politicians. But Patel didn't give a straight answer. Instead, he said something that should alarm everyone who believes in impartial justice. He said people weren't removed for case assignments alone. That word, alone? It hung in the air like smoke after a gunshot. Because if they weren't fired for case assignments alone, what does that actually mean? Does it mean they were fired partly for their case assignments? Does it mean their work became a factor when someone decided their career was over? Schiff caught it immediately. He asked again and again. Each time, Patel danced around the question with the precision of someone who's been coached on exactly what not to say. No clarity, no accountability, just carefully crafted phrases designed to sound like answers without actually being answers. This isn't a small thing. This is the foundation of everything. If investigators at the FBI can lose their jobs for doing their jobs, if working on certain cases becomes a career death sentence, then the entire system collapses. Because who would take those assignments? Who would volunteer to investigate powerful figures, knowing that one wrong move, one sensitive case could end everything they've worked for? The chilling effect doesn't need a written policy. It just needs a few examples, a few careers destroyed, and everyone else gets the message loud and clear. Schiff pushed harder. He brought up specific complaints, specific names of agents who claimed they were told their jobs depended on distancing themselves from Trump-related investigations. Patel's response? He wouldn't address ongoing complaints. He pivoted to talking about standards and accountability, using the language of reform to avoid the actual question. It's a masterclass in deflection, the kind of response you give when the truth would destroy your credibility, but a lie would destroy your career. But that was just the warm-up. What came next would turn the hearing into something nobody in that room expected. Schiff shifted gears, and suddenly 3 words silenced every other conversation in America. Jeffrey Epstein's Black Book. For years, people have whispered about it, a contact list that allegedly contains names of some of the most powerful individuals in politics, business, and entertainment. People who were connected to a man whose crimes against young women became one of the most disturbing scandals in modern history. And, according to Patel himself, that book has been sitting in the FBI's possession the entire time. Schiff didn't let him forget his own words. Back in 2024, Patel appeared on Glenn Beck's show and was asked directly who has Jeffrey Epstein's Black Book. Patel's answer was crystal clear. The FBI has it, and it's under the direct control of the FBI director, not buried in some evidence locker, not lost in bureaucratic limbo, under the direct control of whoever sits in the director's chair. So when Patel took that chair, Schiff had him cornered. You said the director controls it. You're the director now, so you have it, right? Patel's face changed. You could see it, that moment when someone realizes they're caught between their past statements and their current position. His response was carefully worded, almost poetic in how much it revealed by revealing nothing. He said what is known as Jeffrey Epstein's Black Book has been released. Released? That single word is doing so much work it's practically sweating. Released to whom? Released in what form? Released with how many redactions? Because here's the thing. The public hasn't seen an unredacted version of Epstein's contact list. Victims haven't gotten answers about how many names were removed or why. Journalists have been stonewalled when they've asked for complete records. So when Patel says released, what he really means is we gave you something. We put papers in front of you. We can say we were transparent, but whether those papers actually contain the truth, whether they show you what matters, whether they give you the full picture, that's a different question entirely. It's the perfect illusion. The appearance of openness without the substance. It's like handing someone a book with half the pages torn out and calling it the complete story. Schiff wasn't buying it. He pressed further, asking about the scope of what the FBI knows, and that's when Patel made a claim that should make everyone's jaw drop. He said, based on the information available, there's no credible evidence that Jeffrey Epstein trafficked young women to anyone other than himself. Read that again. The FBI director, with access to decades of investigation, with access to victim testimony, with access to flight logs and financial records, is telling the American public that Epstein operated alone. That's not just suspicious. That's insulting, because victims have testified otherwise. Virginia Giuffre, one of Epstein's most prominent accusers, has publicly stated she was trafficked to multiple powerful men. Her testimony includes specific names, specific locations, specific details that investigators could follow up on. But according to Patel, none of that constitutes credible information. 3 presidential administrations, he said, have looked at this material and decided there were no viable cases against anyone else. Think about what that means. Either every single investigator across multiple administrations missed obvious evidence, or there's a decision being made at the highest levels to not pursue certain cases. Either law enforcement is incompetent on a scale that defies belief, or powerful people are being protected. There's no third option here. And when Patel sits in front of Congress and says with a straight face that Epstein's network was a network of one, he's asking the public to accept something that contradicts both logic and documented testimony. But Schiff had one more card to play, and this one was explosive. He brought up an interview that most people don't even know happened. Todd Blanche, who served as President Trump's criminal defense attorney, interviewed Ghislaine Maxwell while she was in custody. Maxwell, Epstein's longtime associate and convicted accomplice, said something during that interview that should have triggered immediate follow-up questions. She talked about a cast of characters who knew Epstein, powerful people who spent time with him. And then she said something even more specific. Some of them are in your cabinet. Let that sink in. Ghislaine Maxwell, speaking to investigators, referenced current cabinet members who were part of Epstein's social circle. And when Blanche had the chance to ask the obvious follow-up question, when he could have said, "Which cabinet members are you talking about?" he didn't. Instead, he asked her about massages. He steered the conversation away from the names and toward details that wouldn't implicate anyone currently in power. Schiff asked Patel directly, who are the cabinet members Maxwell was referring to? Patel's response was to deflect again. He said the Deputy Attorney General conducted that interview and released the full transcript so the public can read it themselves. But that's not an answer. That's an invitation to do homework that he knows most people won't do. It's a way of saying the information is technically available while ensuring that most Americans will never actually see it or understand its implications. And here's where it gets even stranger. Right after that interview with Maxwell, she was transferred, not to a higher security facility, which you might expect for someone at the center of an international trafficking investigation. She was moved to a minimum security prison, the kind of facility that's not even suitable for sex offenders. The timing is impossible to ignore. She talks to investigators, mentions powerful names, and immediately gets moved to a cushier situation. Schiff asked Patel who authorized that transfer and why it happened. Patel said the Bureau of Prisons made that decision. Just the Bureau of Prisons, acting independently, with no input from anyone else involved in the case. He wants the public to believe that prison officials, on their own, decided to move one of the highest profile inmates in the country to an inappropriate facility immediately after she cooperated with investigators, and that this was pure coincidence. He wants people to accept that nobody coordinated this, nobody signed off on it, nobody thought it was worth discussing. The pattern is so clear it's almost insulting. Every question that gets close to naming powerful people, every question that threatens to expose connections between Epstein and current officials, gets met with the same response. I don't have that information in front of me. That was someone else's decision. The documents are publicly available. It's a shell game where the truth is always under a different cup, always just out of reach, always technically accessible but practically invisible. Patel tried to salvage his credibility by bragging about transparency. He claimed to be the most transparent FBI director in history, pointing to the release of 33,000 pages of Epstein-related materials. 33,000 sounds impressive. It sounds like accountability. It sounds like someone who has nothing to hide. But numbers without context are meaningless. How many of those pages are heavily redacted? How many contain information that was already public? How many actually advance our understanding of who Epstein was connected to and what crimes were committed? Transparency isn't measured in page counts. It's measured in answers. It's measured in whether victims get justice. It's measured in whether powerful people face the same consequences as everyone else. And by that standard, releasing 33,000 pages of mostly blacked out documents isn't transparency. It's performance art. It's the illusion of openness, designed to make critics look unreasonable when they ask for more. The hearing spiraled from there. Patel grew defensive, frustrated, angry. At one point, he accused Schiff of weaponizing intelligence, of creating political theater, of trying to set traps. And maybe Schiff was setting traps. Maybe every question was designed to back Patel into a corner. But here's the thing about traps. They only work if there's something to catch. If Patel had straight answers, if the FBI had nothing to hide, if the Epstein files really did show that he acted alone, then no trap would matter. The truth would speak for itself. But Patel couldn't give straight answers. He couldn't explain why cabinet members were mentioned in Maxwell's testimony without follow-up. He couldn't explain the convenient timing of her prison transfer. He couldn't explain why a victim's testimony about being trafficked to multiple men doesn't count as credible information. And when pressed on all of this, his response was to attack the person asking the questions, rather than address the questions themselves. That tells you everything. When someone in power responds to oversight with insults instead of information, they're not defending themselves. They're defending something bigger. They're defending a system that relies on complexity and classification to keep uncomfortable truths buried. They're defending the idea that some people are too important to investigate, too connected to prosecute, too powerful to hold accountable. This moment matters because it reveals how institutions protect themselves, not through one massive cover-up that someone might expose, but through 1,000 small acts of deflection. Through phrases like under review and no credible information, and someone else made that decision. Through releasing documents that technically satisfy transparency requirements while ensuring the public never gets real answers. Through moving inmates and firing investigators and refusing to name names, all while maintaining that everything is being done by the book. The scariest part isn't that this is happening. It's that it works. Most people won't watch the full hearing. Most won't read the transcripts. Most will see a headline about Patel releasing documents and think the case is closed. The system counts on public attention being short, on outrage fading, on the next scandal pushing this one out of the news cycle. It counts on people being too busy, too tired, too overwhelmed to keep demanding answers when those answers are buried under layers of bureaucracy and legalese. But some people won't let it go. Some people will remember that Ghislaine Maxwell named cabinet members and nobody followed up. Some will remember that victims testified to a network and the FBI says there's no evidence. Some will remember that investigators were allegedly fired for working certain cases, and the director couldn't give a straight answer about it. And those people will keep asking questions, keep demanding accountability, keep refusing to accept silence as a substitute for truth, because that's how change actually happens. Not through one dramatic revelation that brings the whole system down, through persistence, through refusing to look away when powerful people want you to, through remembering that oversight isn't harassment and tough questions aren't persecution, through understanding that when someone calls accountability weaponization, they're telling you they don't think they should have to answer to anyone. The Epstein case should have been simple. A prolific offender victimized young women, likely with help from powerful enablers, and everyone involved should face justice. But it's not simple because the people potentially implicated have the resources to make it complicated. They have lawyers and connections and allies, in positions where they can slow-roll investigations and classify documents and transfer prisoners at convenient times. They have the ability to turn a straightforward question about who knew what into a years-long maze that exhausts anyone trying to find the truth. Patel's testimony didn't provide closure. It provided a roadmap of where the walls are, where the system has decided the public isn't allowed to look. And, ironically, that might be more valuable than answers. Because now we know where to push. We know that cabinet members were mentioned and never investigated. We know that prison transfers happened under suspicious circumstances. We know that agents may have been fired for their case assignments despite denials. We know that the Black Book exists, that the FBI has it, and that what they've released clearly isn't the full story. What happens next depends on whether people care enough to keep pushing. There are mechanisms for accountability, inspector general reviews, and congressional oversight and freedom of information requests. But those mechanisms only work if there's public pressure behind them, if citizens demand to know why Maxwell named cabinet members without consequence, if voters insist on knowing whether FBI agents were fired for political reasons, if journalists keep asking what's in the redacted sections of those 33,000 pages. The people who want this story to die are counting on fatigue. They're counting on the public to move on to the next outrage, the next headline, the next crisis. They're counting on this becoming another conspiracy theory that people argue about online, but never actually investigate. They're counting on the sheer complexity of it all to make people throw up their hands and assume that someone somewhere must be handling it, but what if nobody's handling it? What if the system isn't broken? It's working exactly as designed to protect certain people from certain consequences. What if the reason we never get answers isn't incompetence, but intention? Those are uncomfortable questions, because they require accepting that the institutions we're supposed to trust might not be trustworthy, that the people claiming to seek justice might be the ones preventing it. Schiff's questioning revealed something more important than any individual answer could have. It revealed a pattern of evasion that spans administrations, that involves multiple agencies, that somehow always leads to the same conclusion. Nothing to see here. Move along, trust that we're handling it behind closed doors. And when someone finally does ask to see behind those doors, they're told the information is classified, or under review, or already public, or just not that interesting once you understand the context. This isn't about left versus right. This isn't about whether you like Trump or oppose him, whether you trust Schiff or think he's grandstanding. This is about whether powerful people ever actually face consequences for their actions, or whether wealth and connections create an invisible shield that makes accountability impossible. Because if Epstein, one of the most documented offenders in recent history, can operate for decades with apparent help from influential figures, and the FBI's conclusion is that he acted alone, then what chance does justice have against anyone with real power? The hearing ended without resolution. Patel left without naming cabinet members or explaining the prison transfer or clarifying which agents were fired and why. Schiff's questions hang in the air, unanswered, joining a long list of questions about this case that seem destined to stay that way. Unless people refuse to let them, there's power in attention. There's power in remembering. There's power in refusing to accept non-answers as answers and deflection as transparency. The system relies on people forgetting, on attention moving elsewhere, on the next scandal replacing this one. But if enough people remember that Maxwell named cabinet members, if enough people ask why victims' testimony doesn't count as credible, if enough people demand to know what's really in that black book, then maybe, just maybe, the walls start to crack. Because at the end of the day, this isn't complicated. Young women were victimized. A powerful man facilitated that victimization. Other powerful people were allegedly involved. And years later, after investigations by multiple agencies across multiple administrations, the public still doesn't know who those people are or why they haven't faced consequences. That's not a mystery. That's a choice. A choice made by people who decided that protecting certain individuals matters more than delivering justice to victims. Patel's testimony was a window into how that choice gets made, how it gets defended, how it gets wrapped in the language of proper procedure and ongoing investigations and respect for the process. But strip away the bureaucratic language and you're left with something simple. Powerful people asking you to trust them while refusing to prove they're trustworthy. And the only question that matters is whether you're willing to accept that or whether you're going to keep asking why. The next hearing is coming. More documents will be released, probably with more redactions. More officials will testify, probably with more deflections. The question is whether anyone will still be paying attention, whether the public's demand for answers will outlast the system's ability to avoid giving them. Because that's how these stories end. Not with a dramatic reveal, but with a slow fade as people get tired and move on and decide it's too complicated to understand anyway. Unless this time is different. Unless enough people decide that trafficking victims deserve better than bureaucratic double talk. Unless enough people refuse to let Ghislaine Maxwell's mention of cabinet members disappear into a transcript nobody reads. Unless enough people remember that when someone can't answer simple questions under oath, it usually means the simple answer would be damning. The truth is sitting in files somewhere, in unredacted documents and complete flight logs and full testimony transcripts. It exists. It's just being kept from the people who have every right to see it. And as long as that continues, as long as officials can say, we released everything, while clearly having released nothing that matters, justice remains theoretical. A nice idea that doesn't apply to people above a certain level of wealth or influence. This is the moment where you decide whether that's acceptable or not.